Hello and welcome to another episode of A Single Window. So this is kind of the last day we're going to discuss this quadrant system. I think at this point we kind of get it, but I think this, the sort of, not the longitudinal, but the sort of vertical, we're going to do one more day on this just to really reinforce exactly what it means and why it's always been something that's been so predominant in all symbolism. So a good example of how somebody that used all of this was Hercules. So this in the center is supposed to be Hercules. And Hercules was helped by both of the major gods that we've talked about before that were supposed to represent these sort of modes of thought. So we have the rational, logical Athena. There's a lot of times where she helped and came up with an ingenious invention or an idea for him to make himself more successful. And you really, in ancient Greece, these archetypes that everybody's supposed to look up to, it's really important to understand that they needed the gods' help. And we have to see this as more as an idea of these abstractions that are attributed to gods, not so much they're gods that are in the same idea that the gods that most monolithic, not really monolithic, but monotheist kind of cultures have today. It's a different kind of thing. And he was also helped by Apollo. And this is before, like I say last time, the Trojan War. So both of these were used quite freely. The vertical one was a decision he made when he was a young child. And it happened at this moment. So this is Hercules when he's a really young guy, before he really went through all of his stories. So the story goes, and this was, I think this is from one of Plato's dialogues, that there was two women that approached him on a road, and one of them was Kakya. So Kakya is the girl on the right there, and she came up first, and she started trying to lure Hercules into this life of decadence and this life of the easy way, the easy route, trying to live just to work and to get food enough and have enough pleasure in life and just enjoy yourself. And she rushed up, kind of tried to win him over right away. And the other girl was named Arete. And Arete is an interesting concept because we translate it just as virtue, but there's more to it than that. And this is the only time I've really heard of it where she was personified. And it kind of shows you how their gods are personified too. These are just ideas, but they give them human character. So Arete came up afterwards and she said, I know who you are. I know who your family is. I know you're a good man. I think that you should take the hard road. You should go in a way that is going to challenge you, in a way that's going to prove your virtue and your arete. Your arete is the ability to be successful in no matter what situation you come up against. And this is a really big thing, especially in pre-Socratic Greece, is this idea of arete, being really good at whatever you do. It didn't even really have to be something always thought of as good, but if you were successful at something, that really proved something to everybody else. So Hercules, as you probably would have guessed, chose arete. And this gets to the concept that the Greeks have. Greeks didn't see the world as just time passing. They had two concepts of time. So they had chronos, which is like, okay, this is like a flip book going along. You have all these images that come along and all this time that goes along. And you also have kairos. So the way they explained kairos was that it is that moment of when an archer is pulling back the bow and is firing onto a target. So it is this precise moment of going through time, which is the opportunistic part of time. So what Hercules was going through at this moment was his kairos, and there's many opportunities to take the high road in their way. But it is really the high road as in that it's going to be a harder road. And she explained that to him at the beginning, but he still chose it. So this gets to the Greek concept of the hard is the good. So the good isn't just simply doing good in something. the good is kind of seen as the godly nature. So a lot of people have the sort of etymology that good comes from, the word good comes from God. And for them, in order to be like this, it's your road is going to be hard. It's not going to be easy in order to get there. And that's what essentially the Greeks believed in. Okay, so Hercules decided on taking the high road, the hard one. And it was kind of believed in Greek sort of ideas that this road wasn't necessarily always going to be hard, but it was going to be hard at the beginning. And it was kind of an accepted fact that if you were going to make your name, if you were going to do big things, that you were going to have to do this. And it was going to be not an easy road. And that was not that big of a deal to them. There was no kind of life hacks they were going after at that time. They knew that this is the part of it. If you're going to make your name, you have to do big things. In order to do big things, you have to take risks, and you got to do something that most people are unwilling to do. So when he takes this road, it's also a choice in, they kind of believe that a lot of time, especially for him, since he had Hera against him, they were worried that she was always going to have it hard anyway. But if you choose hard work, or if you choose the hard road, I believe the words that Plato used is that you're buoyed along and you go into it happily because you see it as, okay, I've made this choice, I'm going to do the hard route, and then it doesn't seem that hard. But you have to make the choice, and you got to understand that it's going to be hard before you start. And then you're welcome the sort of pain of the road, I guess you could say. So for him, it wasn't that big a deal. So that's not the only reason to choose this one thing. The beauty of arete is that it's greatness and no matter what you do. And the beauty of the good in the way the Greeks conceptualized it is it was a static thing. So you may be wondering why right now I have a picture of a moth and a moon. But this is a really good example. And some people have debated whether this example should be used and if this is actually how moths do their navigation. But the point is, and I can give lots of other examples if you don't want to believe this is to be the way the moths navigate, but there's a lot of people that would make the argument this is that the moth used to orient the way it flew based on where the moon is, as only one major source of light in the world. So it's like the main thing that's out there that you can always orient yourself towards. It moves, but it doesn't move very fast. So you can kind of, okay, if I'm going to go this direction, I can be this direction, or relative to the moon, I'll be going this way. And then that was a good way to navigate, especially when it's dark all the time. And it's not very easy to see some of those nights. So this was a good way to do it. The problem is that on the lower level, and in the world today especially, this is a good way to take the metaphor, is that it's not like that anymore. There's a million lights. There's lights everywhere. And this is one of the reasons that people have postulated that moths get lost and they bang into these lights over and over and over again. It's because they've lost their main source of orientation, so they just go to another source of orientation, which puts them off and what makes them run into it over and over again. So that's not the only danger. For moths on the ground, there's also fires. So not only is there lots of distractions and things that would make you go the wrong direction, there's also things that can lead to your death. But if you're heading towards the moon, and if you're heading towards greatness, you have the support of the gods. That's the way the Greeks saw it anyway. And you would be protected. So that was the safest way to go in some ways. Yes, it was hard work. Yes, it was something that not for the weak of spirit, I guess you could say. But that's just the way they thought you had to do it. So this gives us an idea about what this center is. So it's about affixing one thing, which is the good, or some of them, I mean, a lot of the cultures in history would have this as being the God, but one element that you can orient everything you do. And a lot of people talk about the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. If we get distracted and if we lose track and have more than a one-track mind, then you're just not going to get anywhere. You have to be of single purpose. People often say that. So the idea is, and a lot of the other cultures throughout time always had you looking towards the sky, always had you looking for, if it wasn't gods, it was birds that had spiritual qualities that would protect you or teach you new things. If you look at somebody like the Northwest Coast, the Aboriginal people there, that's what their belief system was. And it's all kind of the same in a lot of ways. Okay, so one that would be kind of undebatable for them, a lot of people, like I say, that analogy has been used by sort of mystical people to use the same point that I'm making it for. And so I think that it's been sort of the water's been muddied around it just for that reason, that if it's being used, then people kind of want to prove it wrong. And it's just sort of human nature, I think, to do that. It's sort of when some people glom onto an idea as to try to disprove it or kind of rattle up their cages because they think they're onto something, and it just seems to be natural. But here's one that people haven't really spoke out against. This is one, this animal right here, or this insect I should say maybe, is a dung beetle, or scarab, some people call it too. But the thing is with the dung beetle, the same premise as was explained for the moth. It orients itself by what's in the sky. So a lot of people say it's the Milky Way he orients himself towards, and that's been kind of shown in a lot of scientific studies. But I think this is what they're trying to prove. Like, a lot of the kings would always have symbolism with the scarab, and it seems like an odd creature in order to have associated with a king. But these symbols, this is, again, we've talked about this before, this is the sun, and this is the moon. And we've seen these things many times now in a lot of this symbolism. So to me, this means orienting itself, and I don't want to get too far into this, but this form of the moon is often used in this symbolism too, and I'll maybe talk about that some other time. Like when it's a half moon or less, a very crescent moon is usually the one they use for the symbolism. But I think this is heading in the way of the good, and they usually relate the god, well, I mean, this is from Egypt. So Egypt, Ra was one of their main gods that was in the sun or with the sun. So he's heading towards Ra. He's orienting himself towards God. So maybe this is a step too far, but it's an interesting concept that would really kind of tie a lot of these idea systems together. Okay, so a way to tie all this stuff together is one of my favorite books. So the book is called The Brothers Karamazov, and it's by Dostoevsky. This is supposed to be Dostoevsky here. So this story is about a father that is not well thought of, and he has three boys, and these three are the boys, these three here. And I kind of put the other one in there just to help me make my argument. But Ivan was the second oldest one, and he was sort of the intellectual of the group. He wanted to go to keep in mind, this is happening in the 19th century in Russia, and it's kind of the pre-Russian Revolution sort of landscape where things are really changing and people are starting to get these new ideas from the West, and a lot of these Enlightenment ideals that are kind of being passed around. And Ivan is a very big proponent of them and thinks that the Russian people would be better served by some of these ideas that are going to maybe make, especially the peasantry, live better. And like I say, he's well respected. People think he's very intelligent and has a pretty good record amongst the people as far as like his respect of his peers, I guess you could say. The other side is Dmitri. And Dmitri is kind of like his father. He's a sensualist. So that's the word that they use in the translation. This is a Russian book, but the translation that I have, they call him a sensualist. So he parties, he loves women, he drinks all the time and has fun, and he kind of doesn't take on too much responsibility. He's in the military, but that's not really a big part of his life. He's more just kind of throwing away money. He's mad at his father all the time, and he's very intelligent as well, But people don't give him that same respect, and they see him as kind of a wild, crazy person that is just out of control. So those are the two sides. And then the youngest brother, so Dimitri's the oldest, Alyosha. Alyosha is kind of a shy, introverted kid that uh, spent most of his life in a seminary. So a seminary being where people that are religious, so their main person, the top sort of person in the place is called an elder, and it's kind of like a priest that has a lot of responsibility and is sort of seen as the moral peak of the community that they have there in the seminary. And Alyosha is a big fan of the one that they have and thinks that he's a great man and he wants to be like him. So he is very religiously inclined. And then at the same seminary, there is a guy named Rakitin. And Rakitin is kind of a little bit more like Ivan. So he believes in changing of the guard and believes that these new ideas are the new ideas which are very rationally based and very scientific are going to be better for the people. He writes about a lot of things that happen in the world and is kind of he's used by some of the characters in it to sort of play political hits on people, and he kind of does it for himself as well. But all these people are kind of setting the stage, and this book, I've heard before that it was supposed to be just the introduction to a whole series, but he died before he could finish the entire series. And I think his point was Alyosha kept on coming into the situation. So Dmitri was charged with killing his father. And I don't want to do any spoilers here, but Alyosha was kind of a positive influence on the situation no matter what it was. Whether it was with Ivan or whether it was with Dmitri, he was kind of helping any side in it, trying to make the best out of it. And he had sort of intuition that sort of helped him in no matter what the problem was, but he had the respect of both sides. Ivan and Dmitri both respected him. Ivan towards the end didn't like him as much at points, but I think overall really liked Alyosha. Rakitin was kind of the opposite effect. He was kind of making people get angry at each other and separate more, and it seemed like he was kind of a little behind the scenes and always trying to shake things up. So we have a lot of the elements we've talked about so far, and I talked about the Incan cross and why I liked it so much. So a lot of the renditions of it have either the Rakitin version or the Alyosha version in it. So all of them are stacked. So let's take a look here. If we did it, okay, the square goes in there, the circle goes in there, and the triangle goes in there, and it's not very lined up. Just ignore that. But there's either the one that goes up, so it could be up, or it could be the Rakitin one, where it goes down. And the way it was supposed to be oriented, it's not really clear. But to keep it in the same sort of idea as this, we'll say this is the way that the world needs to align. If this is the way that the world needs to align to make everything transmute into what you want it to be, in their case gold, this is of course the Philosopher's Stone we talked about in alchemy, this would be the way to do it. And like I said before, it's an internal thing. This is how you travel between the levels. This is the point they were trying to make, and this is the themes. So we see the triangle going up again here, and there's also kind of a triangle going down there. These are the different levels stacked on top of each other. And to me, this makes a lot of sense. So this is a way to pull it all together. I think this was the point of the Brothers Karamazov as well. But I could be wrong. If you have any ideas that you think would change my mind, please send them in and I'll address them and look through them and see if they do. But this is going to be the end of this series. I think I've explained this well enough, and we'll do just different topics from here. And I can always reference this in order to kind of establish a point that I'm trying to make. But it's really important to understand these geometric shape kind of concepts in order to go forward. But anyway, we'll talk to you soon. Hope you enjoyed. This is the last of the 4-part series, so you made it all the way through. Congratulations. All right, bye.